Hello there, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Gaming History. Today we're going to be talking about the story of Galaxian. Galaxian is a 1979 fixed shooter arcade game released by Namco, originally in Japan, but was then later on re-released in the same year by Midway Manufacturing. In Galaxian, you play the starfighter who operates a spaceship known as the Galaxian, and you have to fight waves and droves of aliens who descend down upon you. Now, the game was designed by a man known as Kazunori Sawano. Now, he was assigned to make this game. Now, he was told by the president of Namco at the time, who was named Masaya Moria, to make the best, quote, post-Invaders game, as the game Space Invaders by Taito had just been released and was a massive success, both in its home country and in North America. And with the massive success of Space Invaders, people were making their own Space Invaders knockoffs and clones, and they would even release their own Space Invaders sequel the following year, 1979, the same year as the Galaxian came out. And so they wanted to make it the best the best shooter game that would post-release of Space Invaders. Now, the game only took about 5 months to develop, but Sawano had ideas for a game like that all the way up to half a year prior to even beginning of development. And this game was actually the first Namco game to use a synthesizer to make its music. Now, initially, early on in the early stages of development, the plans were that the enemies would resemble the TIE fighters from Star Wars, though this was later changed, as of course they look much more original than those original ideas were. Now the designer went back and forth with the sound effects, for the game, which many of which were rejected. Now he wanted the player to really feel like they were in a space dogfight, and so did this through the special effects and the sound effects, and of course, some of course did get there, of course, it does have sound effects, but there were a lot that were made that just got thrown in the scrap. But now eventually it was released on September 15th, 1979 in Japan, and was then later re-released in November of that same year, 1979, by Midway Manufacturing. This is like the third time we've talked about Midway Manufacturing. I don't know what's with them and re-releasing Japanese games in North America. I think that's their thing. I guess that's their thing, I guess. But yeah, and of course, it proved to be a big success, as it even garnered a sequel known as Galaga 2 years later in 1981. It was ported to consoles like the Atari 2600 at the time, known as the Atari Video Computer System, the Nintendo Entertainment System, and a variety of other video game consoles. And you could probably even still get it now if you have some kind of device. But that's all I gotta say for today's episode, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, see you around. Bye, have a nice time.